For over 20 years, Bird Barrier has been revolutionizing the bird control industry with products like Bird Coil, Stealth Net, and Bird Shock Flex Track. However, controlling pest birds in trees has been an unwieldy and impractical process, until now. Bird Barrier's Tree Shock system takes the aesthetics and efficacy of our industry-leading Bird Shock Flex Track and moves it into the trees, keeping pest birds and wildlife out by producing a harmless but memorable electrical shock along the tree's branches, and as we all know, birds know like zap. Tree Shock is a UV-stabilized PVC tube wrapped with a pair of conductive stainless steel wires, much like the conductive rails on the Bird Shock. One wire is hot or positive, the other is ground or negative. When a bird or animal stands on the Tree Shock, the circuit is connected and the intruder gets zapped. For best results, Tree Shock should be installed on freshly pruned trees. Smaller twigs and branches that are favored by smaller birds will be mostly removed during the pruning process. Pruning a tree will also help reduce the overall bird pressure as they feel more vulnerable with fewer places to hide within the foliage. Working in trees can be dangerous for obvious reasons. Use appropriate safety equipment and consider hiring a specialist for your application. To install the Tree Shock, first assess the configuration of the tree to determine the best placement for the shock tubing. Most birds roost on the sturdier limbs of a tree, so those should be focused on first. Lighter limbs and twigs may be protected using the holiday light method that we will describe in a moment. Birds perch on horizontal or angled branches, but not on steep perches, so a combination of Tree Shock and insulated lead wire should be used. Tree Shock is sold in the following pre-cut lengths: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 50 feet. These lengths can be used as is and don't need any cutting or splicing. Tree Shock is also available in longer lengths of 100, 250, and 500 feet, which may need to be cut or spliced. Use a tape or string to measure the main branches to be protected from the trunk to the tip. When branches fork, a T connection can be made to connect one tube to another. Lead wires running up the tree's trunk will be used to connect the tube to the energizer. Determine a position to install the energizer that is easily accessible but not far from the lowest set of branches, but high enough that it won't be tampered with by passers-by. Cut the Tree Shock tubing to the appropriate lengths with the Tree Shock snips. These are heavy duty and will be able to cut through both the tubing and the wires. Then, slide a piece of heat shrink tubing onto the Tree Shock and out of the way by a few inches. We will come back to this piece in a moment. Remove the black filament from about 1 inch of the end of the tubing to free the electrical wires. Crimp a male connector onto each of the wires at one end of the Tree Shock section. Fold the wire over and insert into the connector. Crimp it down hard using the blue setting on the crimp tool. Test to make sure the connectors cannot slide off the wire. Slide the heat shrink tubing over the connectors and use a heat gun to shrink the tubing so it holds the wiring in place as shown. Make sure the two wires do not come in contact with each other. Use another piece of heat shrink tubing at the other end as well to hold the wires in place. Do the same thing with female connectors if the two tubes are to be connected to each other end to end. When a branch forks, it will be necessary to install a T-junction. First, determine the placement of the junction. Next, use a utility knife to cut the thin black line holding the section of wire where the junction will be placed. Use the hollow marlin spike to pry a small section of each wire, hot and ground, away from the tubing. Place an open female snap tap connector into the groove of the marlin spike as shown. Slide the marlin spike with a connector underneath the wire and close the jaws. Do the same with the other wire. Insert the male connectors from the end of the second tube into the female connectors, and the connection is now complete. Measure a section of lead wire that will run from the beginning of the branch to the energizer. Strip the ends of the wires and crimp female connectors to one end and loop terminals to the other. Attach the female connectors to the male connectors at the end of each section of tree shock. Attach one loop connector to each of the two terminals on the energizer. For very tall trees, or trees with many sections of tubing, a central lead wire can be run up the trunk with each section of the tree shock connecting to the central wire using the snap-tap connectors. Separate the two wires from each other, crimp on the female snap connectors, and then connect either the tree shock or another lead wire using the male connectors. Tree shock tubing should be secured to the limbs every 2 to 3 feet or as necessary to keep the tubing on top of the limb. Use the mounting cable ties to affix the tree shock tubing to the branch. Position one of the ties at the trunk end of the run, loop it around the tubing, and tighten. Drive an aluminum nail through the eye on the mounting tie and into the branch for a secure hold. Repeat this process every 2 to 3 feet or as necessary to follow the top contour of the branch. Aluminum nails will not damage the tree, and since they are soft, they will cut apart if they are ever hit with a chainsaw. For thinner branches, simply loop the tie around both the tree shock tubing and the branch itself and tighten. Not only can tree shock tubes be secured on the tops of the limbs, they can also be strung from branch to branch to create perches in between the branches. Birds will land on these perches, receive the conditioning shock, and head for the hills. This is referred to as the holiday light method. A long length of tree shock can be wrapped around the tree in a spiral fashion, much like lights on a Christmas tree. The tree shock charger is powered by two D-cell batteries. Under normal conditions, the batteries should power the system for about 60 days. It will be less if there is heavy bird activity. Be sure to check it on a regular schedule. Bird Barrier offers larger solar and powered chargers as well, but the battery charger is the recommended unit for tree shock. Call our offices to discuss other options if mains power is available at the tree or for larger trees. Once the system is installed, activate the tree shock by turning the Energizer's power switch to the on position. Test the tree shock for the proper voltage by using the Bird Shock digital track tester available from Bird Barrier. The tester reads in kilovolts, thousands of volts, and for most installations a reading of around 3, which is 3000 volts, is normal. Some smaller installations may show higher voltage readings. If the tester shows anything below 2, check the connections, especially around any T-junctions, for grounding. When possible, test each section of the tree shock. The wires wrapped around the tubing should always run parallel to each other and never come in contact. If there is a loss of voltage, it is most likely the positive and negative wire touching each other under the shrink tubing. Mount warning signs on the tree to notify people of the shock risk. Also, notify the landscape company, property management company, and other stakeholders that the system is in place, how to turn it off, and whom to call for service. One last thing to note. Trees are living organisms and their limbs grow longer and thicker each year. Proper maintenance of the tree shock system is essential not only to keeping it working in order, but to ensure the overall health of the tree as well. Once each year, turn off the charger and check the tubing and connections. Check and adjust all the installed sections of tree shock, especially any connections or T-junctions, as these are most prone to coming loose. Be prepared to replace cable ties, add or adjust tree shock tubing, repair any damage, and change the batteries in the charger.